Ladies and gentlemen, this is David Mirikitani with another episode of Weighing In. We're brought to you by USA Wrestling, the national governing body for wrestling in the United States, and sponsored by Nike Wrestling. Go to athleteps.com for all of your Nike and USA Wrestling branded gear, like the sweet stuff that my good friends Mark Austrian and Grant Turner are wearing today. Fellas, good to see you again. How's life?
Good here in Iowa. Weather's been great. A lot of rain. My grass is looking good. Mowing 3 times a week. I don't know what else you could ask for.
The weather on the 10s with Mark Austrian. You never know what you're going to get, GP. You never know what you're going to get with these guys.
I need a riding lawnmower. Anybody want to donate a riding lawnmower to me? I'm getting tired of pushing mine.
We're looking for Toro as a sponsor, ladies and gentlemen. If anybody's got a Toro hookup, let us know so we can get Mark in between his naps while Grant's coaching him on the lawnmower. So, GT, how was the weekend?
It was good. All great.
Yeah. You're getting ready for a bunch of Olympic stuff and everything else, right?
Yeah, we got a whole bunch of that rolling for Nike, so love it. Looking forward to that.
Yeah, it's I don't want to disclose too much of what you do, but you're doing some high level stuff. You and I just happen to be talking about that. So congratulations, man. It's obviously you're doing some big things over there. So the big news of the week for once was not something Grandview Wrestling did. So that's good. We'll take it for a week. Stanford Wrestling and the other 10, total of 11 sports get saved. I'm going to make the obvious statement. We're all very happy about that. We're all very happy that wrestling is saved. We're all very happy that all the Olympic sports are saved. I'll just go first. And I've been wrong a lot. Could not have been more wrong about this. Like I thought these guys were dead man walking. They raised a ton of money, but we've seen a lot of situations like this where people raise money and it falls on deaf ears. Mark, I see you nodding. I'll let you go first. Why do you think they changed their mind?
I think they got a lot of pressure. I think there were going to be some serious lawsuits, David. That's what I think, and I could be wrong. I'm only right 50% of the time. So
that's generous, but okay.
That's kind of what I'm guessing. You get 11 different sports suing the athletic department because they had no reason to shut their programs down. And now that COVID is kind of starting to see the end of the light there with the infection, I think they're thinking that they can fill the football stadiums this year, hopefully, and everything's going to be back to normal.
What'd you think? Yeah. What'd you think, GT?
I think, I don't want to necessarily give credit to one specific athlete in this process, but Shane has a lot to do with putting a big light on Stanford and, his story and him winning a national title and him being kind of I would say the poster child for like these, maybe not necessarily lawsuits, but to keep the momentum going. They had been dealing with it for a very long time. And, I think, just that continual momentum that they continued to have, along with alumni, financial benefits that they've been able to raise. I think it just put a lot of pressure on the university, and the light hadn't gone away. And, it got down to some pretty serious things. I think it was really, really awesome to open up that door for them to have that conversation. But I think, if I'm gonna give Shane the credit. He basically he saved it.
Yeah, I saw on Twitter they had like the picture of him with like the Thanos glove, yeah. Which was awesome, from the Avengers. Like, how basically he saved it. I think it was Crew. Maybe it was Crew or Lacrosse that also won nationals for Stanford.
Yeah.
And they had like they turned their jerseys inside out or had them all plain black or plain cardinal red, which is interesting talking to a guy like you, Grant, which, where branding such a big issue with Nike, in a normal circumstance. But obviously I think, even a guy like you if they were Nike situation, you go, I understand what you guys are doing. Sometimes there's a cause bigger than the current cause. I'm in agreement with you that I think there was a lot of pressure. I also feel like somebody's got to have dirt on somebody, or this was just part. I'm kind of a conspiracy theory guy, and I feel like Stanford got the best of both worlds. Like they get to keep these programs, and most of them raised enough money to fund themselves, even though they got like a $2 billion endowment and they wouldn't dip into it. Like now, I mean, I think wrestling GT, am I right? They raised like $6 million.
I think it was more than that. I think they got up to, I think, 10 or 12 million.
Yeah.
Okay, let's just split the difference and call it 8 or 9. Okay, let's go on the low side. They raised $8 million, and you're probably right. But if they raised $8 million, you know, you can endow that program for a long, or come really close to it, you know, like fund it for a couple of years, let that money grow, keep, you know. So now Stanford's in a great situation. They get to keep wrestling, and it costs them nothing. You know, now the other thing is I actually had a chance to interview Shane Griffith. Oh gosh, maybe it was like a month, 6 weeks ago. And, you know, he was doing the same thing Real Woods did, which was graduating. You know, like these guys really made it a priority to get their degrees, which is, you know, I think a lot of times guys pick a school to wrestle and then they're going to get their degree. I think these kids that pick Stanford, like I'm getting my degree and then I'm going to work on my wrestling. And, you know, especially in a year like this, like we saw Real Woods basically take the semester off and most of the second semester off, you know, and he just jumped in because it was a free year. And we talked to Ray about that at Nationals, his father. I guess let's talk about now what's next. I mean, who stays and who goes? Because just right off the top of my head, they got Griffith, they got Abbas, they got Real Woods, they got Vandermeer, you know, Nathan Traxler had already, all these guys were in the portal. And now, you know, what happens next? So GT, I'll start with you. Like, have you heard anything about who's going or staying?
Nothing yet, but I did see, I believe on Twitter that, you know, the NWCA coaches convention had put out the national search has begun for the head coach, you know, so it's out there for people to whatever apply or, you know, make inquiries to. So I think everything hinges on the staff. Who do they bring in? Who do they keep as far as the staff is concerned? Because, you know, Coach Borelli is now at American University, you know, and, you know, Terrapelli and Ray Blake and some of the other guys that were on staff with them throughout the season, you know, what are their goals? What are their aspirations? Do they want to be head coaches? Do they want to stay with the kids? So I think basically when you talk to, I would say if you talk to Shane or Abbas or, you know, Real Woods, like whatever it is, I think it just bases like who's going to be leading the ship. And I can't think of anybody right off the top of my head that would like rise above to go take on, you know, whatever the mess is at Stanford. It could be a mess. It could be like, oh, this is the greatest thing in the world now. Now we have support. We have, you know, people that are engaged, people that want to be a part of our program. I don't know. I think it just all hinges upon who gets that job if those guys stay.
Yeah, and I've got a couple ideas or a couple theories. Mark, well, first of all, you wouldn't be in the position to hire these guys because you wouldn't have cut the program and you wouldn't have made Jason Borelli go look for another job. Well, let's say somehow you are magically put in I don't want to put that bad juju on you, but if you are now in the spot of hiring somebody, do you escalate Blake and Terrapelli or do you go outside in?
I think I would stay with who we have. They know the program if they're willing to do it. My problem going outside, David, would be the same problem that I think we all three are thinking is the administration going to back us? Is this only going to be a 1 or 2 year? Look how quick they got rid of it. When something happened, we were dumped and they gave us no support whatsoever. We had to go out and fundraise. We had to find our own tournaments. They made us test 4 times a day. We had to practice outside, you know, all kinds of stuff, Dave. And unless, you know, they're going to have a hard time finding somebody outside that's going to actually trust them when they come to an interview. I hope some of the kids go back there, but like you were talking about, they have their degrees now, a few of them, and probably the elite few have their degrees now. what's the point of going back there? You know, they did what they wanted. They got wrestling back for Stanford. Are they going to go straight into a major? Do they want to get their master's from Stanford? They got their undergrad from Stanford, was what they went there to do. So, you know, I don't know. I hope some of them go back because they're not going to have much of a team next year, and they didn't recruit this year, so it's going to take a while.
Yeah, so you touched on a bunch of things which I kind of wanted to talk about. First of all, I'll give my 2 cents worth. I hope they make Blake, they bump him from the 2 to 1 hole and hope bump Terapelli from the 3 to the 2 hole and hire a new guy in the 3rd hole. You know, those guys led the fight. It's a little different than like Poeta getting hired at Illinois. You know, while we all agree we love Poeta and, you know, he's already changing singlets and he's already changed the location of where they're going to have their home meets. It wasn't like Illinois was on the chopping block or even like a, you know, like they were like a top 40 program. I mean, they're in the top 20 pretty much every year. They're trying to go from good to great. So the similarities are not, they're not identical situations for sure. Here's the notes I wrote down as you guys were talking. Number 1, COVID. 2, the governor of California and how restrictive that state was. 3, the stability of the program directly tied to recruiting. And 4, this reminds me of the Arizona State situation when they got put on the chopping block. And now that was different too, because that came after the season, but a bunch of schools came in and cherry picked those guys out. This is the opposite, where none of those guys have really left yet. But you said something, Mark, and it's super true. And Grant's the only one coaching currently on a college staff, but the recruiting cycle never stops. It just never stops. Like, you know, Grandview's won national titles like 8, 9 years in a row, almost won it this year. Clearly top echelon program at the NAI level. But if you said you can't recruit for a year, it actually probably won't catch up with you the next year. It's going to catch up with you a couple years down the line. So these guys not recruiting, I mean, the good news is they'll have, all these guys can have their money if they want to come back, but it's really hamstringing to a program that can't recruit everybody anyway because of their academic limitations. You know, so, I mean, GT, if you think about it from a stability perspective, because you're in this situation and you think about the importance of recruiting, because I know you're one of the key guys there. I know you don't take a lot of credit. It's a team thing and Nick's your leader, but in terms of out-of-state recruiting, I know you have a lot to do with that, a lot of portal stuff. Can you tell me what it would be like as a coach if they just said, okay, for a year, you know, you're the Walking Dead, and then they revive you?
Well, I mean, you've seen, and to maybe look at other sports that have maybe had the death penalty, like SMU football and or, you know, other institutions where they've had to basically like go without, you know, whatever it is, maybe like a postseason, like, yeah, you lose out on recruiting. I mean, because you want to have an opportunity to compete. Maybe they've, you know, suspended postseason or whatnot. But with all of the COVID manure that's been happening with recruiting, like for the NCAA Division I coaches, you know, they've had to go without certain contact periods. So I don't necessarily know that like it affects them in that big of a rush, because now, you know, you still have all the guys that were on the team, maybe not a ton of depth, but now maybe you got some money that's freed up. Or, you know, you do get I believe it's a 1-year waiver for the school to pay those additional scholarships for a year. And then, you know, if you know that you're going to have wrestling in the fall, you can bring all of those guys on campus in the fall. So, you know, and then recruiting can definitely start, but, you know, it's going to be a wild ride to see, you know, if they can gain some traction within recruiting, knowing like, hey, the program is coming back, or, you know, whatever it is, like Ray Blake is the new head coach. But I think losing out on a little bit of time in recruiting, of course, you're maybe not necessarily getting all those guys on campus, but a lot of them weren't doing on-site visits or even Zoom calls to do the recruiting right now anyways. And plus you're only doing that. And I mean, I would state that the kid that's going to Stanford probably only looking at about like 5, 6 schools nationally that would have the same academic requirements.
Yeah, Northwestern and the Ivies kind of thing, right? Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, Grant, I'd like to say something kind of about what you were talking about. and I understand of the recruiting this year, the kids didn't get to go on campuses and do a lot of, visits. I think they opened it up for starting now that kids can go do visits.
June 1, just so you
June
know.
1? Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess the thing that I'm thinking of is in years past, if this would have happened 5 years ago, I think it would have been really detrimental to the program. I think it would have taken them 4 or 5 years to recover from something like this. Losing most of your team and not being able to recruit for a year, it's like starting over. The nice thing that they have going for them is the portal now. It's open, it's available. They can cherry pick who they want academically out of the portal, possibly. I'm not saying there's a lot of guys that in the portal that could actually go there academically, but it gives them another option they didn't have 5 years ago. So that may make it a little bit easier for them also.
Yeah, and it's a good caveat, right? Because just because the portal's open, when your standards to get into Stanford are what they are, it's certainly a different thing. One of the things as I'm listening to you guys that hit me was the team race implications. So let's say for the sake of argument, these are just names that I'd heard were leaders in the clubhouse. Real Woods was thinking about going to Oklahoma State. Jaden Abbas was thinking about going to Cornell. And I know for a fact Shane Griffith's short list was North Carolina, Penn State, and Michigan. Okay, so now if you put those guys on those teams, like if you put Real Woods at Oklahoma State at 141, you put Abbas at 41 or 49, the opposite of whatever weight Yanni goes, and then you put Shane Griffith, who's obviously, the prize of those three, being a national champion in a less than stellar training environment the last 12 months, and put him on any of those three teams. Like UNC goes from a top 20 team to a top 12 team. Michigan goes from we need everybody to come back to be in the trophy hunt to in the trophy hunt. And Penn State probably goes to the favorite, I would think, versus Iowa, or else really, really close, because they would have 5 finalists on that team. They had 4 in the finals this year, 3 champs. So, I mean, what happens at the Stanford coaching decision and how the stability of that is projected to those student athletes? Like you guys both said it, like if it feels safe, maybe they go back. If they feel like the rug can get pulled out from underneath them again, like once a shame on you, twice a shame on me kind of thing. I think that's going to be a huge decision. I think if they want to keep those kids, they probably need to just promote Blake or Tirapelli, because those guys have navigated this thing and they've actually won. Like they won. They beat the system. How many people can say they beat the system? I mean, it'd be like if Nick retired at Grandview and you bring somebody in from the outside. It's like, well, now GT, like if you bring it, let's just say you bring me in, you got to explain to me, well, this person's good to talk to about this. This person doesn't really like wrestling that much. This person's super pro wrestling. Whereas if they just bump up you or whoever else is on that staff, it's a lot easier to bring somebody in at the bottom than it is at the top when you're navigating things politically.
Yeah, I think, well, Tirapelli being, from California also leverages to, the fan base, maybe some alumni do, like, they know those guys, right? And I believe that, Jason Borelli is also doing jumping jacks over at American University for, the kids that he recruited, the program that he had, all of the alumni that he's had over the years. I would think that he's happy. I think he'd be happy for that program to stay alive.
He is, yeah.
So, I mean, if you can keep some of that continuity together, maybe bring in a little bit of heat and maybe bring in somebody at that 2 or 3 spot, or, depending upon what Ray wants to be able to do, you can have some really good tie-ins. But yeah, you don't necessarily have to, kill it and start over. You have some people there that are invested into the Stanford wrestling community. So I'm looking forward to seeing what happens there.
Well, and the sad thing for Borelli is he had to go through the trauma of essentially having to leave and getting a job. And, I know a bunch of good people applied for that American job and he got that job. And I'm sure he's happy to be an American. But if somebody had told him 6 months ago, hey, Stanford's going to they're going to, reprise the program, bring it back, whatever the right term is. I think he would have stayed. Those are his guys. We've all been coaches. Mark and I in junior college, we don't have those guys as long, but those are still your ride or dies for life. And if you have a choice of not leaving those kids in an environment that you created, I think Borelli would stay. So he's an interesting, I wouldn't say casualty of this, but he's an interesting side effect of all this. So obviously, like everybody else, we'll keep you guys posted on what's happening with this. We're going to share screen here and go to, here's the Pan Am rosters. I got this in 80 font for you, Grant, just so you can take a good look.
Absolutely.
So here's the women's roster: Sarah Hildebrandt, Ronna Heaton, Shakara Winchester. Down the line, some big names like Kayla Miracle, Tamira Mensah-Stock, Adeline Gray. Got a chance to talk to Lee Pritz the other day. He said Miracle had a really good training camp up there. Got some good matches in, got to wrestle like head-to-head with people like Helen. So the Steiner's the head coach. Clarissa Chun's the national coach. The Greco team is Havisov, Miranda, Sancho, Johnson, Porter, Provisor, Stefanowitz, Braxton Amos, the young guy there, and Donnie Longendijk. And the coaches there are Lynn and Herb House. And then you go to the freestyle team: Vito, Shelton Mack, Joey McKenna, Pantaleo, Dake, Lujan, Taylor, Nate the Great, Snyder, Stevenson, as Shane likes to call him, Billy Z, and then Joe Russell are the coaches on that team. So I think, obviously most of us are most familiar with the men's freestyle team. When you look at that roster, Mark, you can go first. What are your thoughts?
It's some of our best young guys coming up are going to get a shot. So, I'm looking forward to that. I don't know a lot about Sheldon Mack. I know he had a good tournament lately. But I haven't seen him wrestle that much to really know how quality of a guy he is. McKenna, I always enjoy watching him. Alec is a stud, and I think he's where he wants to be at 70 kilos. He seems like he fits there perfectly. And then we get into the meeting of our lineup, Dake, you got Taylor, you got Nate Jackson, Lujan, Snyder, Stevenson. That bottom half is just outstanding.
Yeah, GT, what do you think? I think that's a rock solid, Pan Am group. It's basically all the Olympians and, besides maybe Gilman, you're getting some, getting some good work out of those guys, getting them prepared for Tokyo. So it'll be great. And then I think the additions, I don't think Nate Jackson's ever made a Pan Am team or represented the country at the Pan Ams yet. Taylor Lujan, same thing. I don't think he's ever been a Pan Am or world team guy. So I think, and Alec being at 70, I think Mark's 100% right. I think he's a 70 kilo guy all day, but he's, in between, he's in between 65, 74. So I think he's going to shell out and wrestle really well there. So I think the men's freestyle rosters is great. Shelton Mack is also a beast. If you guys don't get a chance to watch much of him, go back and watch some film. That guy is a monster.
Yeah.
So he definitely has the ability to surprise somebody at Pan Ams, I think. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do.
Yeah. So I think the obvious takeaways are Dake, Taylor, Snyder, Stevenson are actually our Olympic team members. Like you said, GT, Oliver was the guy that tried to qualify the weight, but, he beat McKenna. So he was the alternate. Vito was the alternate. Gilman's injured right now. Bader did an interview with Arujau at camp and talked about, I like Vito's attitude. He's like, I don't want to go to the Olympics. I didn't earn it. I want Gilman to be able to go healthy. I'm excited to be at, be on the Pan Am team. And, the Pan Am team is a little bit like watching, juniors, under 20s, under 23s. Like these are kind of like the steps that you see, like Lujan won the US Open. He had a default win in the finals, but he made the finals. Nate Jackson, you're right. He's never made a national team, never won the US Open, but he looks super good against Kyvan Gadsden. We talked about that, after that weekend up there in Coralville. Shelton Mack, he beat the Arizona State kid late. Pantaleo, he lost to James Green. But again, you're talking to a guy that's been the dude at 70 kilos in America for like 2014 or something. You would probably know that better than me, Grant, because he's a Nike guy with JG. But, it's interesting that a lot of our Olympians are wrestling in this. The same thing on the Greco side, and your boy Provisor's in there. So that'll be nice. A little bit of Grandview love in there. Braxton Amos, really, young guy. And he just seems like a guy that's anytime, any place, wrestle wherever he can. And then, on this side, you got Hildebrandt, you got Winchester, you got Miracle, Mensa Stock, and Adeline Gray. So 5 of the 6 ladies Olympic team members, everybody but Helen is on that team. So I do think that this tournament counts for seeding points towards the Olympics. But actually had a chance to talk to Cody Bickley, and he told me that most of the stuff, especially on the men's freestyle side, that the seeding points are already set. And it's interesting because our team has a lot of guys that really won't be seeded. Doesn't mean they can't place or can't win it, but they're going to have to come through, they're going to have to come through a harder path. And it's not like before where you could kind of get a great draw and everybody be stacked on side A and you're on side B. So, and we're recording this on Monday, May 24. The Pan Ams, I think, are the 27th through the 30th. They're this coming weekend. So, guys should, ladies, gentlemen, you guys should watch that. It's a great chance to see a bunch of great wrestling in all 3 styles and root for the good old USA. Next subject, Jaden Cox to the New Jersey RTC. It's an interesting move. I mean, Jaden, we obviously know what happened with him at trials. He was at the Ohio RTC for 15 minutes. Basically, I think he's going to split time between New Jersey and Colorado Springs, which certainly will be at the very least a culture shock. We get to work with Nate, work out with CJ Brucky. Reese Humphrey will get his hands on him. GT, when you think about that, what do you think? How do you think that could impact Jaden? Because he said in an interview I saw he is coming for heads for the rest of this year at 92. I saw an interview where he was very respectful. He assumed Snyder would medal. So, he's planning on staying down at 92 the rest of this year and then trying for 97 in 2022.
Yeah, I think first and foremost for Jaden, as he is respectful and he's just a full-time professional guy. He's like, hey, I don't foresee us not placing at the Olympics at 97 kilos. Gave credit where, he hopes that USA Wrestling does do that. But I think, for right now, I don't know what the status of the Olympic Training Center is as far as COVID rules and all that kind of stuff. So you may be seeing him train a little bit more at the NJRTC with those guys just because of, the laxness of restrictions. So yeah. I think, training with some of those guys there will be really, really great for Jaden, get a little bit of a kind of a room atmosphere, maybe just because Colorado is not what it is right now due to what the state of the world that we live in. So excited for Jaden, new home, new things, new learning, even if he's there two times a week or, 2 times a month or whatever it may be, he's going to get a good room and a good atmosphere, and I'll be excited for him.
What do you think, Marco?
I think it's a good move for him. I really do. I think he would have spent a lot more time at Ohio State if it wasn't for COVID. I think that pretty much is the reason he wasn't able to go there. And I think New Jersey's a good fit for him, David. I think he's going to have great competition in the room. I did hear that Rutgers is now no longer affiliated with that RTC, though. That kind of surprised me, yeah. So it just came out, I think, this last week. So they're not affiliated with it anymore. So, but I think it's a good move for him.
Well, that RTC had a good U.S. Open in Coralville because Nate won, Austin Schaefer won. So I think that's probably part of what attracted Jaden too. I mean, first of all, Jaden's arguably one of the 10 best guys in the entire world. Then you combine that with the fact that he's big. Because, if he's one of the 10 best guys in the world and he weighs 57 kilos, you can find him some guys that can at least give him trouble just on sheer size. When, you're either 92 or 97 kilos, 200 to 215 pounds ballparkish, and you move like a 125 pounder, it's really hard to find anybody that can even put you in situations where you get tested, where you need to improve. And so they got a couple big bodies for him. You know, Reese feels like he, you know, I've had Reese on the podcast. He seems very much like he's kind of stolen the best attributes of his dad as a coach and then put his own sauce on it, as one of my friends would say, you know, put his own personality on that group. Those guys seem very loose. You know, if you see any of their Twitters, or they work out together, but they play together, you know, so I think that's it'll be interesting. I think, and obviously it feels like Jaden can improve there for no other reason, just training partners. So some portal news. There's always portal news. Iowa State signed Sam Schuyler and Austin Kraser. Those guys are, you know, both national qualifiers, probably help them with depth, especially at heavyweight with Gremmel being gone. So that'll help them. Gage Garcia, who was a huge recruit coming out of high school, two-sport athlete, football, wrestling, left Michigan without ever wrestling a match. I talked to a couple coaches that are at good football schools, and I think they're going to try to see if they can get him in on a football scholarship, because, you know, football has 85 full rides, you know, so then like he can be a walk-on in wrestling and then, you know, have an impact there. And then probably the biggest portal story is Austin Gomez, who had retired because of concussions and then got his degree from Iowa State, is in the portal. And the story is the top 5 schools are Wisconsin, Iowa, Oklahoma State, Wyoming, and North Carolina State. Some of those feel like to me like they make a lot more sense in terms of him getting into the lineup right away than others. You know, and then there's the whole culture shock. I mean, you know, I think, you know, Wyoming is a very different environment than, say, NC State, but Wyoming's had good luck at 141. You know, like Bryce Meredith just won his first LFA fight last night, so shout out to Bryce Meredith, out there punching people in the face now. So he did a good job. When you guys think about Gomez, the iconic memory of me of Gomez will always be when he tossed DeSanto and almost won that crazy dual meet for Iowa State. GT, I know you're a Cyclone. I mean, is that kind of how you remember him, and where do you think he might end up?
Well, I wrestled for Iowa State. Doesn't necessarily mean I'm a Cyclone all the time. I'm also a huge Nike guy, so I'm rooting for all the Nike schools just so I can have that out there publicly.
Fair enough. Yeah, I actually had this conversation with Ospander. Did I not, Mark?
You did.
Yeah.
So, as an alumni of the program, I'll say that's where I'm going to take this stance from. Is that was a crazy cool match, and once again, I've known Austin for a really long time, but he's got so many great memories as wrestling for the Cyclones. I think that's one that sticks out because, once again, Iowa State and state of Iowa, I mean, that's some powerful stuff. You get a lot of memories out of those duels, and that was a really awesome duel for Iowa State to kind of come out of nowhere and keep it that close. But, you know, AD, he wasn't going to go out like that. So, you know, really, really cool. One that Austin can continue to wrestle with the medical issues that he's faced. Looking forward to finding out where he ends up, because you're going to get somebody that really loves wrestling there. So
he scores points too, man. That dude scores points. He doesn't lose 3-2 very often. You know, he's a lot more likely to lose 10-9 than 3-2 for sure. Mark, who leans much more Hawkeye than Cyclone, what do you think about Gomez?
My only concern with Gomez is that I love watching him wrestle, but my concern is all the concussions he's had. And if I'm the head coach of one of those 5 programs that he's looking at, I have to decide if I'm going to invest money in this kid and he turns around 4 weeks into the program and gets another concussion. I've spent money there. I mean, you're kind of walking on thin ice, not knowing if you're going to have him for the next few years, because he's had issues with it. And you don't want to see him get hurt. You don't want to have to see him retire again. You hope that he can go through and wrestle, because he's very entertaining. I thought he was a great fit at Iowa State. I think he'll be a good fit wherever he goes. I just think the coaches are going to be a little bit worried when you're recruiting him, whether or not he's going to be able to make it.
It's a super valid point, right? Like the number one ability in the world is availability. You know, I mean, doesn't matter how good you are if you can't be there to do the job. I think it goes without saying we're all obviously rooting for him, and I also think all of us as competitors would try to come back. Like if we felt terrible and then we felt better, we're all going to try to come back.
Yep.
It's why everybody stays for one too many wrestling matches, one too many boxing fights, one too many MMA fights. Because, and I think it's actually sort of mentally healthy if you're a strong person. Like I'd rather know I don't have it anymore than think I might, you know, and I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole, but like, it's kind of like watching Phil Mickelson yesterday. Like that guy, you know, he's 50 years old and almost 51 and beat 99 out of the top or 98 of the top 100 players in the world on a course, you know, was playing like 7,800 yards. And I mean, the guy was like 200 or 300 to 1, you know, and nobody thought he had a chance and he did it. And, you know, we're all, I think, somewhat golf fans. You know, I know, Mark, you're probably the best player of the three of us, but I mean, I think that's more almost a human interest story where even if you're not a huge golf fan, you're like, man, this guy went and did it. And you have to have respect for that and, you know, that kind of thing. So it'll be interesting to see. So we got about 6-7 minutes left. So a couple things, just so people know, Matt Chat, Grant got me an interview with Tadaki Hata. We had technical difficulties. Coach Hata was kind enough to let me re-interview him like in about an hour, and it'll come out right away. That's going to be episode 99. Mark sort of teed it up. This week we'll do episode 100, and we're also coming up on episode 200 of Weighing In. So I'm not a big landmark guy. I should have done a better job of keeping track of all the folks I got to interview, especially on the 100 episodes. But while we've got a few minutes, I just want to thank a few people. First person I want to thank is Justin Tritz. He's the creator of Track Wrestling for people that don't know. And I reached out to him, I think it was 5-6 years ago, Mark, about us doing the rankings.
Yep.
And he was kind enough to give me a shot. And then the rankings turned into a podcast, and then podcast turned into 2 podcasts. And that's really where it started. I want to thank my dad for all the wrestling conversations I've had with him over the years. And you got to be pretty smart about wrestling to talk to a guy like my dad, who's really smart about wrestling. I want to thank my mom for being a communications teacher and hopefully trying to keep this stuff fairly entertaining. And then all the guys that have ever hosted the podcast with me, like, you know, Mark, Grant, Alex Steen, Andy Hamilton, Marcus Hayne, all those guys, all you guys make it a lot easier to do this job. And people that don't believe that I've done a 1-man booth on play-by-play and I've done a 2-man booth on play-by-play, and whatever they pay me, I'd give half of it away to have somebody else with me. Like, this is arguably my favorite 45 minutes of the week, talking to you guys on the air about wrestling. And then I want to thank all the people that got me in touch with people to do great interviews, like Lee Pritz for getting me Art Martori, Grant Turner for getting me Tadaki Hata, these people that I didn't have relationships with, and, you know, they only did it because of somebody else. And then all the folks that have come on. I mean, I've had a chance to talk to pretty much the coolest people in wrestling. You know, I've had a chance to interview Jordan Burroughs. I've had a chance to interview Cody Sanderson, Terry Brand, Zeke Jones. I mean, I have a whole list. I don't want to exclude anyone, but it's if you had told me 5 years ago that I would have had a chance to do this and be coming up on combined 300 episodes, it's very humbling. That's all I can really say. So, you know, I want to, you know, Mark, well, Grant, let me thank you first, because, you know, as a guy that helps us a lot with our charity events and a guy that pretty much knows everybody in wrestling that I don't know, you've been, first of all, your hustle is real, and how hard you work is an inspiration to me. So I want to thank you for that, brother.
Anytime, boss.
And Mark, you were really the person behind the rankings that nobody knew about. You know, they only put my name on them for a couple of years. The last 2 years they put it on there. And then when we were going to do the podcast talking about rankings, you were the only guy I would do that with. So it means a lot to me that you work so hard on it every Sunday night. You know, you took time away from your wife to do that. And I don't get a chance to thank you publicly enough. So I want to thank you for doing that.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it. And I mean, we've had a lot of fun doing this. 5-6 years ago when we started, it was a lot of fun just doing the rankings. you know, we'd sit and we'd argue about guys, and, you know, you'd get the last say, and that's the way it should have been, you know, but I put my 2 cents worth in, and, you know, this year it's been a lot of fun. We're on screen. I still don't think I have a face for radio, but I don't know. But it's been fun.
Well, the attractiveness quotient went up when we added Turner to the podcast. So that's for other,
That helps us a lot, doesn't it, David?
well, comparatively, it hurts us, but overall quality, it helps us. So, and it helps us on the hair side of things. So, you know.
As the one guy that has hair on the top of my head, I would like to say thank you to all my fans out there for sure.
This is a choice. I just want you to know that.
Hey, Grant, just so you know, I may have 1 year of eligibility left. I figured it out. Have you had a 61-year-old wrestle for you yet?
I haven't, but there's always a chance to be the first, Mark.
Oh boy, we could break some records, couldn't we?
Hit records.
That would be awesome.
Break some records, break some hips. Something's going to get broken for sure.
Let me know when they go to 30 matches. Okay, with a break in between.
Yep, we can figure that out.
I would highly suggest Ostrander only goes second semester. Okay. And make sure there's an urgent care nearby in the greater Des Moines area.
Yeah.
And basically a waiting ride share, since I'm not supposed to use labels, that or somebody in a car ready to boogie. So I think next week we'll break down a lot of what happened at Pan Am's, and I think we'll probably talk a little bit about the 100th show on the other podcast, because you guys are actually going to be a part of that. That's going to be a nice compilation of everybody's skills there, and I'm looking forward to that one. That's a person that's pretty near and dear to me, who I'm surprised agreed to do it, but I think we'll do a great job. So on behalf of Grant Turner, Mark Ostrander, I'm David Mirikitani. We want to thank all you guys for watching, listening, sharing, and all the support. Talk to y'all next week.